Hi. Yeah. So we are continuing our discussion on how to use generative AI and LLMs for software testing. And we're going to focus on generating test cases, which is a pretty basic thing. So load up google.com or any other website that you want. Like any of them are fine. Like if you want to use your own web page you'd work and test on, that's awesome. But just take 5 minutes. And again, I implore you to take the 5 minutes. This is like the future of testing in your career and everything. It's worth 5 minutes to take it a little bit seriously. But just look at your web page, just pick one web page and think of a bunch of test cases for it, all the basics, right? Like on google.com, there's a text box where you can enter search queries. There's a Google search button, I'm feeling lucky button. You should probably like test cases should be, you can just do them in your mind or you can write them down. But entering search queries, hitting Google search or I'm feeling lucky buttons, and then you have some expected value, right? This may seem simple, but if you click the about button or the store link or privacy or terms of services and settings, what do you expect to see? Just think about the test coverage that you would deliver for about 5 minutes. And I won't waste 5 minutes of internet, but really you should pause and just go think about that for a few minutes. And the reason is, this is a form of baseline for understanding how the AI works and works relative to the way that your brain works. Because testers think that they're snowflakes and only they can test, and only humans can test, and only humans are creative enough to create test cases or thorough enough. Only they understand their website enough to create great test suites. There's some sarcasm in that, in my tone, but humans assume that to be the case. And that's because we're humans and that's what we do. That's what we do for our living in our profession. But it's worth thinking and realizing how our brain does work and how well it does perform the task of creating software test cases. So write these things down or think through them a little bit thoroughly for a few minutes. Because the obvious thing we're going to do here in a second is compare it with the AI and see how the AI does relative to us as professional. I'm assuming you're a professional software tester or something in the field, something similar in the field. And even be creative here. There's a lot of things to test in here. Like what if you right click on some of these things, right? What if you double clicked on them? What if you long pressed on them? What if you put, I'll give you a hint, a really long string into the search box? What happens? How long of a string, for example? This is a question I used to give people actually when I interviewed them I was hiring people to work at Google, and I would ask them to create test cases. We'd talk about it and I'd zero in on things. Particularly I'd zero in on the length of the string you'd enter into the search box. And not just that, but the particular types of inputs that, what about numbers versus letters versus all capitals? What about an empty string, right? What about a space? About using only a space? And what are the different boundary values? What about emojis? You can imagine there's a lot of different test cases we come up with for just a simple page like the Google homepage. So even think about some creative ones too, right? Like, what about some even more extreme test cases? Let your mind go a little bit creative. All right, now that we used our creativity and all of our intellect, so the next step is to upload a screenshot of the Google homepage or whatever website you were using. It could be your own homepage. Remember, we talked about in the last video, you can, if you're using internal websites or something proprietary, you don't want to share that data with the outside world, you can use local LMs as well. So update a screenshot to the LM and just simply, ask it, describe what's on this page. Just like we talked about, we walked through what's on the page. And remember, a thing testers think about or forget about a lot of times is this is a chat bot, right? They ask it one question and they judge it based on that, on how smart it is based on the one single question. It's like you walk up to somebody randomly in the street and ask them one question and you judge them based on that alone, right? By a single response. You wouldn't even do that in an interview situation either. And in this case, so we're going to ask them, start with a question of just, hey, walk through what are the things on the page, and it lists things that are kind of like what we did a second ago. And then we ask it a follow-on question, which is generate test cases for this web page. We'll get a little bit of response because we've added to the conversation thread a list of the things on the web page to make sure it kind of thought through that list independent of the pressure of coming up with test cases for it. But the AI will come back. This case, it's Google Gemini, and they'll come back with test cases, right? Enter a valid search term, right? Enter invalid gibberish search terms. It's funny, an AI would say gibberish, right? A machine actually says gibberish, and talks about, using the microphone icon to verify voice search functionality. Like, look at that page and realize that's what the expected interaction, right? So there's a lot of thinking going on. If you realize, not only is the AI processing what the page looks like, it's understanding how an end user, a human, would interact with, doing some empathy of how the human would interact with those different elements, and also is understanding what the human would expect to have happen, right? What functionality or behavior it would expect to have happen. There's a lot going on there, which we usually would only attribute to like a human, right? Traditionally, people always said that only humans can create test cases, and the machines just ad nauseum repeat them, hopefully unreliably at best, over and over again. But here we're seeing quite a bit of creativity and understanding and empathy with the user, and understanding of the website. We haven't given it the code. We didn't give it a specification. It's key here. Everyone wants to have specifications in testing. A lot of people do. They don't need to be there to do testing. I've been talking with some folks that, like, some testing vendors where they actually, I said, like, hey, like, AI can do some testing, and they're like, oh, but what about, I need a specification first. And I'm like, you do? So you don't really need that. The AI can actually create a specification, or it can be inferred and implied, just like a human could look at the page and mostly figure out how it's supposed to behave. In fact, in a weird way, that's almost better, because that's the same interface that the human has for this web page. They have to also figure out, without a specification, how to use the application. So it's started creating test cases here, right? This is kind of cool. It's funny to me that, like, most testers don't know where to start, right? Or they take their existing test cases and then ask it to create permutations or double check them or something. Like, no, you just have the AI start generating test cases by itself. So a cool thing you can do too, which maybe you didn't do, maybe you did some of these, but you can also just ask the AI. I asked it here, asked ChatGPT. I said, what types of cases are likely to break it? That's all I did, was ask that, right? So, like, not just like, what are good things to make sure the happy path or expected functionality works, but what might break the thing, right? It came with SQL injection. That's pretty cool, although, it's interesting because Google doesn't really use SQL Server, but maybe some weird stuff happened. Cross-site scripting, extremely long URL, like we talked about. All sorts of things. Heavy load testing, corrupted cookies. Like corrupted cookies, I'll bet no one watching the video thought about corrupted cookies, right? Or thought about malforming the HTTP requests under the hood, or inducing a crash in the page and seeing how the page recovers, like, say, through the developer console or something, right? So but I just asked it just what types of tests and input might break the thing. And it came up with this list of these. If you thought of all these, you're a fantastic tester, and I should probably send you a t-shirt, but I don't think I'll have to send out any t-shirts. But you can just ask. And then on each of these, you can ask for more. You can say, give me more things that are likely to break the app. Give me more tests or classes of tests. Just for number one, like, give me a bunch of instances of SQL injection attacks. Like, list 10 of them, 20 of them. Like, it's pretty crazy. You can ask it even, like, why did you think of that particular test case? Like, what is that testing? Like, why is that a vulnerability? Why is that interesting? Why did it pick those particular values? Why did it pick the particular long URL? Like, how did it pick the length of that input string that it's going to use, right? Guess what it does? It's also seen the entire web. Like, these LLMs have been trained on the entire web. And the funny thing is, if you ask it, it knows how long the longest input string is for the Google homepage, even without going out and fetching it. So it knows what the boundary cases are. So this is a lot. Like, so if you're a software tester, like, whatever you're testing, just ask GPT, just ask the AI for help with test cases and generate ones. You'll look like a smart tester. You'll look like a very thorough tester, a very experienced tester. And if you don't know what some of these things are, you can ask the AI to tell you about it and why it's interesting, how to execute the test case, what types of issues you expect to find, and behaviors that are incorrect. So you can learn how to be a great tester with this. And by the way, this is a better list than I've had with almost any testing team I've worked with in my life in the past. So then, also for fun, You can just ask it for bizarre and extreme test cases. Like AI is pretty amazing. So it can like think about very large scale text input, right? It even did things like, so extreme zoom levels in the browser is pretty cool. One I thought number 4 is I thought was interesting. Like it said multiple rapid searches. Well, I hadn't even thought of that myself, right? When I thought about writing test cases for the homepage. And then I realized that I thought, well, HTML is not that stateful. It's probably not that interesting. But if you look into the JavaScript, there's a lot of asynchronous code going on for analytics and other things. And so, yeah, you could actually have race conditions in the Google homepage by clicking the I'm feeling lucky or the search button really, really quickly. So, and this list goes on and on and on. Like you can spend a whole afternoon with it. In fact, a great tester will and would do that and have this great conversation with ChatGPT and AI. I highly recommend it, but most won't. But what's interesting is the AI is the sum of all these testers' knowledge. Every YouTube video, like this one, every book, like a lot of books, a lot of blog posts, like all this stuff that's out there, documentation, regulations from quality and testing, all that stuff is out there. And the LLMs have consumed it all. It's your job as a tester to extract that data and that value out and bring it into your testing and coverage. So I shared this a year ago because with a little bit of hand holding, a little bit of scripting and using the API, like I was able to get it to generate a whole, you can actually so for all the test cases it came up with, you can say export to Jira, right, into a CSV file. And so it kind of accumulates this list of test cases, and then you can say export it, and here's a list. When I shared it with the world, like it fell on deaf ears. I think, again, part of that psychology. Testers don't want the AI to do these things, to do what they do, let alone do it better or more interestingly, but it does. And so it can generate tons and tons of test cases for even the simplest of web pages. And then testers will go, and I've seen them say, "Oh, but what are there any dupes?" Or are super important. But you know what? They're legit. If you curate it and you supervise it a little bit, you get great sets of test suites that are super valuable. And the AI even knows which ones are low priority, high priority. Look in the column in the middle here. So AI can generate test cases, whether people want to believe it or not. And it's pretty simple. We just did it. You just ask questions, and you can say export to a CSV. I also recommend you take another few minutes here if you really want to get the most out of this, and sit down and work with AI to generate a bunch of different types of test cases for your application, the one that you work on, in your day job, and get, go and do the fun ones. Like, what are the likely ones to break? Find new test cases. Like, AI will just tell you what is interesting and what you're missing. Copy paste and upload a spreadsheet of the test cases you have already, and ask the AI, what am I missing? Like, what should I add? Like, are there any test cases in here that are like defined incorrectly? You can also upload your specifications. You can upload your test code, test automation scripts if you have any. You can upload all that data, and then ask the AI to give you more test cases based on that. It's pretty amazing. And it's all free, and it's here and available today, but so few testers are leveraging it today. A fun one I like to do, I don't think I have the next slide. I don't think I have it on there, is you can also ask it to create test cases in the form of a joke. And and dad jokes. Like they're really dorky, but it'll make, I won't even pretend to make one up or remember one, but they're pretty, test nerd dorky test cases. It'd be like, why did the tester enter an empty search field on Google.com? It might say, I'm making one up, because it didn't want the answer. I don't know, something like that. But that's pretty funny. Like, not only can it just be very serious and do boring kind of rote work, but you can have fun with it too. So if you took your time, paused it, and went and worked with it, like, think through, just take a minute or so and think through the tests and test cases that the AI came up with that you didn't, which ones were useful and where it failed, and create stuff that wasn't interesting. But kind of get a feel for the texture of how your mind works relative to the AI. And again, it's worth noting, in a recent workshop with live human beings, about 40, 50 people in each of them. The AI found a superset of what the testers came up with in terms of test cases, like literally a superset, and literally tests that the humans didn't think of. And they were useful and really actually pretty good test cases. So the stuff is real. AI can really help you generate test cases, and it's here today. A funny thing, not even that funny, I guess. I think it's funny, but you realize, like, again, reflecting back on how AI versus the humans work in terms of generating test cases, is that um, you don't even want to take the time. You probably didn't take the actual full 8 to 10 minutes and think through it up front. But you know why? Because your time is expensive and precious, right? But the crazy thing is, the AI is not, right? It's in fact, it's free. It's actually free. People think, I've heard things like you hear crazy things. People say, oh, AI is expensive and it's prohibitively expensive and all this stuff. People are making things up. You just did it, and it's free. Not only is it free, it's faster than you. And I like to bring in this thing. It's definitely less expensive by orders of magnitude than your time. But not only that, it's also at least 10 times faster generating these test cases. And if you multiply those two things together, you get like 100x kind of increase in productivity in test case generation. So, and usually things are like significant, very significant inflection points if they're a 10x difference, right? We're seeing more than 10x differences in capabilities and rates of production of test cases. Almost the most problem you have now with AI, if you're actually really using AI to generate test cases, is that the AI will come up with too many test cases, and you have to think about how to prune them. Think about which ones you can either manually or automatically execute, because it can just generate so many. Like, the problem is not coming up with valid test cases. The problem is just the time to execute and review the results. So this is a significant change. Next time we'll talk about hallucinations, the big goblin scary thing for most testers, and a mental block on adopting and using generative AI in software testing. For now, thanks. Happy testing.